Well, greetings, everyone. I feel like I'm addressing the state. Normally I'm sitting with the panel, I was telling the crew, a little more casual. But definitely stoked for all of you who can make it, and we want to thank, obviously, Benzinga for having us here today. What we'll do really quick, because I think it's more fitting, is an introduction from each of our panelists. This is a really cool, diverse panel. One thing I do want to disclose straight away, being totally objective, we have people that are going to be contributing some information from an analytical standpoint. Those that are tied more so to the technology side of the industry. And then also people are actually plant touching on the front line and offering retail products. Really makes for a killer combination of input on this specific topic. So we'll start off with ladies first. Jackie, a former colleague of mine.
Why, thank you. My name is Jackie Gonzalez-Becerra. I'm the Vice President of Revenue at Weedmaps. If you don't know who we are, we're the leading B2C cannabis marketplace. We also build some great SaaS and tech solutions for the industry. And I've been with Weedmaps almost 9 years now, across a variety of roles and leading up the sales team for a few years. So excited to be here.
Perfect. Welcome again.
Hello, I'm Sebastian, co-founder and co-CEO at Jeter. Founded the company with my partners back in 2017, and today Jeter is, I guess, the #1 pre-roll brand in the industry. We're having a lot of fun, and we're just evolving like everybody else.
Awesome, thank you.
My name is Harrison Bard from CustomConesUSA.com. We are the leading and most trusted pre-roll supplier in the industry. Not only do we have the widest variety of pre-roll cones with hemp wraps, different types of filter tips, and customization options, but we also have deep industry expertise in the entire manufacturing process. We have all the different machines from grinding to sifting, tabletop pre-roll machines to automated pre-roll machines, as well as packaging solutions that could scale from small mom and pop businesses up to LPs and MSOs.
Thanks, Harrison.
Tough group to follow. My name is Tim Conder. I'm the CEO of Tilt Holdings. Tilt has really two parts to its business. So the first is Jupiter Research, which is the largest distributor of vaporization technology in North America with about 15% market share. And the other is Plant Touching Assets on the East Coast, located in Massachusetts, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, where we support many of the brands that purchase vaporizers from us in those states.
So you guys, you did that so much better than I could have done. And again, so you hear some of the diversity, and I know this number's increased greatly, but one thing again, with having Jackie here from Weedmaps, just in my time there, I remember we had access to 60 million data points in a given month. So again, the amount of information that's up here on the stage or it's accessible by these individuals is really priceless, and I think it's perfectly fitting again for this topic. So we will jump right into it. One thing I want to start off with is there was a 2022 article published actually by the Journal of Cannabis Study. Among other points, it actually concluded that while price is an influence on choices, demand is relatively inelastic. It went on to share how some people are still sourcing from unregulated or unlicensed markets and the rest of it. But beyond that, it's suggesting that consumers may be seeking lowest cost, but there was a significant gap in this study, and it was around their understanding of consumer choices. And as a consumer, as a medical patient myself, but also as a home grower and as an individual in this industry, I kind of found this perplexing as well. So I think it kind of brings us to that proverbial question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. And for those that don't know, it was a jungle bird that obviously something happened genetically, so it started with the egg. This is not such an easy answer, though. So I kind of want to start at the top, and Tim, maybe if you could give a little insight, and I know this is kind of just bull by the horns, the very topic of this session, but do you think there's a greater influence, or do you think the question's that black and white?
Between price and what?
Between demand and supply. So who really is creating that demand on the front line in the retail stores?
I mean, I think consumers ultimately, in my opinion, drive demand, but they're guided to that demand by lots of factors, whether it's price, brand affinity, new product innovation, but ultimately consumers are driving that demand. From our perspective.
And then I think I direct it again also, Jackie, to you, because you have a very objective perspective on all this with the access that you have and this information. Has Weedmaps looked into this as well from an analytical standpoint on, is that really true? Is it really what's on the shelf, or are there certain searches that go on for products that might not technically exist on a platform like Weedmaps?
Oh, we look at this data all day, absolutely. Flower is queen. She's queen everywhere. It is absolutely the category that people are looking for, searching for strains. Followed by that, vape pens, of course. Close, third is edibles. But I don't know if I agree, Tim. Consumers driving the demand. I think bud tenders have a lot to do with what people are buying. Brands are doing bud tender incentives. They're giving, money back in their pocket to make more sales. And where we do see a lot of success and longevity and bud tenders pushing those brands is people who bring that experience and education to the bud tenders. They invite them out to their cultivation. They bring in-person training to the shop. Like those moments with the bud tenders really are ingrained with them. And then they go and they, upsell that extra product that they remember and experienced even after that incentive's over. So I think the bud tenders definitely have a lot to do with it. And the trends itself, like the legacy market is where I think a lot of people watch. A lot of the buyers that I talk to, they're on Instagram and Reddit following these legacy growers, looking at the trends and like what products are going to be hot now because what's hot on the streets are hot in the shops. And so that's absolutely something the buyers are looking for to drive those consumer trends because the consumers are definitely drinking out of the fire hose right now. But yeah, we're always looking at that data. How can we, better merchandise weed maps to put the things that they're looking for in front of them so that buying journey is quicker and more straightforward.
Makes perfect sense. And so I think I think the next question we'll start off with Sebastian, and then Harrison, you can pitch up as well just after. So how much, so I'm kind of biased coming from California. I know Jackie, you're the same. We understand that there's some sort of influence historically that exists in certain markets. But how much do you think the status of legalization in a state makes an impact on what's offered on the shelf? So let's just take, for example, California versus Oklahoma, or Florida versus South Dakota, when that comes, right, or Ohio. Do you think there's an influence on where the reefer madness stands in those certain markets, or how long they've had medical legalization or not? So really curious, the influence of the existing state of the market. So I'll give an example. So the state of California legalized, at least at a local municipality level in the county and city of San Francisco in 1990. Then we legalized medical in 1996. But we didn't legalize adult use to 2016. Everyone knew what wax, shatter, crumble. Everyone had a dab rig already. Yeah. Was that the case in Oklahoma? And then does that influence what you guys are offering on the shelf?
Well, I mean, look, to your point, 100%, like, there's like a natural evolution in every state. Like, the products that are in the shelves in California today, like, things are moving faster now. But, what was in California on shelves 10 years ago is just now arriving in shelves, in some of these newer markets, right? It's a combination of, like, the evolution of the people that are in the industry, right? People in California have been doing this for a long time, so they're just more advanced, but then also consumers, right? True. Which is something really interesting. And to the last question you were asking, is infused pre-rolls, for example, right? That's the category that we're king in. When we launched in California, infused pre-rolls was about 10% of the total market. Mm-hmm. Fast forward today, infused pre-rolls is about 60% of the total market of pre-rolls, right? Insane. So as a brand, you can actually create a market for consumers. And I think that's something that, as you watch the other markets, for example, we launched Arizona 2 years ago. When we got to Arizona, infused pre-rolls was 8% of the total market share, was about $8 billion a year. Today, Arizona infused pre-rolls is about 80% of the total pre-roll sales. And it's about $130 million a year. Jeez. In Michigan, when we launched, infused pre-rolls were about $10 million a year. Today is $250 million a year in infused pre-rolls. So as you can see, like, the California trends, definitely start catching on to other markets, but then us as a brand and, other brands out there, like, you can create a market for yourself and bring that evolution because, I mean, we're going to states and people don't even know what infused pre-rolls are, right? And I'm speaking specifically to our category, but
like donut hole. What are you talking about? Donuts?
The donut. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, man, 100% the state of legalization in the markets, and just overall, like, California just happens to be that market where, like, things other states follow suit after.
Yes.
So very influential, and yeah, man. But it's exciting too because there's the opportunity, right, to come to other states and show them, what products you can bring and educate consumers and create a market.
And I think you're right, and I'm curious to hear, obviously, Harrison, your perspective from a tier two or from an ancillary company. But I have to agree, I was just in Hawaii for the Hawaiian Cannabis Expo in January, and people on the island admit it, short of genetics, they have phenomenal genetics, but people literally were coming up and saying, we're 10 years behind. Yeah. Even though we're just halfway across the Pacific, we're that far behind on some of the technologies or some of the trends. So I think you're spot on. And then Harrison, how are you seeing this? You offer a lot of the ancillary components that go into these products that are offered on the front line.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a life cycle depending on the market, and a lot of it depends on the legalization and the lawmakers. So medical states that are really conservative and restrict the free market, like Ohio, typically have less competition, and also pre-rolls aren't typically allowed right away. So pre-rolls just recently became allowed in Ohio, and just as the last week or two in Hawaii as well under their medical program. But in places like Michigan, where they're more pro-business, you see them skip a lot of the slow life cycle rollouts in those stricter states. And so infused pre-rolls blow up right away. And then those are consumer preferences driving that demand. So you'll hear bud tenders all the time that consumers just come in saying, what's the highest potency product? So pre-rolls originally started off as a bit of an afterthought in 2017. Farmers were just putting shake and trim in there, and then they became full flower pre-rolls, and then as customers just kept asking what's the highest potency product, smart, savvy operators started making infused pre-rolls, and now, as Sebastian said, it's over 50% of the market in any given state is infused pre-rolls. And then the ability to create the infused pre-rolls helps, as well as the price economics. As the price of flower has come down, as well as concentrate, you're able to offer an infused pre-roll for the same price that a regular full flower pre-roll was selling for just the prior year. And then the equipment needs to be there as well. So there's been a lot of advancements in pre-roll manufacturing tools as well as infusion equipment, which further drives down the cost, creates higher quality products, and customers are just looking for all of those things, cheap, better, and infused pre-rolls meet all of those needs. So that's helped, catapult that category to the fastest growing in the industry.
Excellent. And Tim, I think you have probably a good few points here.
Jackie's so right. I mean, we think of our largest buyers and bud tenders are our largest consumer. But to Sebastian's point, just to maybe clean it up from my perspective, it's like brands can seed a market or seed demand, and then consumers drive that demand. But it's been so cool to watch what you guys have done to create that market, which was real in the unregulated space and has had such an awesome growth trajectory in cannabis. And so, but Jackie, what you said is so right. Like when we talk about consumer, our most important consumer is buyers and bud tenders. They're our largest consumer. They buy the most product. Well, they use the most product.
So I'll have you hold the mic, and we're going to go a little off script, but you are bringing up the bud tenders, or as I like to call them, cannabis consultants to be PC. But they do very much influence that buyer's process and ultimately their purchase. And now looking at where we are, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room are from Florida, one of the top 4 populated states in the country, next to Texas, California, and New York, of course. A lot of people joke around about this is, the state's waiting room to heaven, although we have Arizona on the West Coast, so you guys know you're not alone. But having said that, do you, and again, we'll start with you, because you're a bit of an anomaly because of how much you cover and how much you all do. The fastest growing audience as far as consumers are Gen Xers and Boomers, and to a certain extent, silent generation, although you guys know they're kind of getting up there. So being that that's the fastest, and with the recent Pew study, it says 78% of all residents in the U.S. are pro-cannabis on some level or another. Do you kind of put your foot down and come into a market, I'm curious to hear your opinion too, and go, wait a minute, what about my grandma? What about someone that really could just use like a high CBN, low THC, or high CBG, low THC? Do you ever come in and try to kind of dictate or drive that conversation versus more of that power being in the hands of the cannabis consultant or the customer?
For our business, we don't, right? Because we support brands. We let them drive who their demographic, who their ideal customer is, right? So we're not asking them to make changes to who they're targeting from our perspective, and so it fits into what we want our stores or our distribution to look like.
Gotcha.
But we do curate our portfolio based on target audiences. I think, I always like the John Water quote the filmmaker John Waters says, when asked how he's been able to maintain success with younger people late into, I think he's in his 80s or 90s at this point, and he said it's an obsession with youth culture, right? Like, ultimately, trends follow youth culture, and I don't think it's any different in cannabis. While there are obviously certain products that my grandma wants to use, and it might not be a Jeter-infused pre-roll, but tell you what, like, as she builds her tolerance up, maybe she graduates, right?
Targeting the older versus the younger demographic. That's a different twist on marketing for sure. Definitely true. Well, and I think this kind of goes into, and we did have this question, just kind of how much the demographics in general, really shape a market. And again, I think we'll go back to you really quick with this question is, you all see the analytics too, right? You have people who are actually signed in. I have a Weed Maps account, so you all know my core, my demographics. So you know the core demographics of a market. But are you seeing more engagement from those older audiences in what they're looking at to potentially purchase? Sorry to Jackie.
Yeah, no, we definitely are. They're growing in the edible and vape category the most. I think, learning how to like roll a joint or pack a bong might not be the first thing that they're gonna jump into, but absolutely they are. And we're always thinking of ways at Weed Maps too, how do we make their journey on the app to shopping a little easier too? They might not be as tech savvy. And so building onboarding quizzes so we can show them, the path to purchase and find those categories and brands they're looking for easier. But I mean, to Tim's point, like youth culture drives it all. Like we're looking to target audience that is spending their, a lot of their paycheck every other week on cannabis. Like the people who are gonna, people come to me and say, Jackie, like I want to try edibles. What do I do? Like they might not be the one to go search online or go to the dispensary. So targeting that insider is critical for us. And I think that youth culture is interesting because they are kind of the ones that sparked all this, the big vaping, right? Nicotine vaping. And we see those trends come in. Like they want their vapes to like pop with flavor. If it tastes like weed, it's like, no, it needs to be a mango, lemon, lime, cherry, whatever. And so it's definitely drawing from those trends that the youth is bringing in that then the older generation is adapting to, because they probably all think, weed tastes like a piece of candy, which it all doesn't.
And I think you make a good point. I hope everyone in this room, no matter what position you hold within this community and ultimately within this industry, is we're all brand ambassadors, not just for our own brands, but for the brand of cannabis and the movement of legalization. So I think you make a really good point, no matter if you're a vice president of sales or a CMO. There are people that are coming to us that are cannabis curious, as we say, that just want to know, like, what's the best edible? What's the safest pre-roll? So I think you make a very valid point with that. But I'd be interested a little bit on your opinion, too, because you're front line, Sebastian. So,
I mean, it's interesting because for us, like, one of our main reasons to launch Jeter is we foresaw that, like, as cannabis continues to gain more mainstream adoption, you're going to have the grandmas and soccer moms and, just all types of walks of life now coming into dispensaries and buying cannabis. And let's be honest, like most of these new consumers, are not going to want to buy flower, get home, roll it up. And a lot of people do, right? The connoisseurs will always do that. There'll always be a market for that in this industry. But the more mass adoption cannabis takes, or cannabis, becomes more globally accepted, it's like, I mean, I don't like comparing it to tobacco or anything, but I guess from a practical perspective, it's like, you don't go and buy tobacco and roll it up, right? You want to go and you buy your pack of cigarettes because you want to get straight to smoking.
At least in the U.S.
Yeah.
You go to Europe, my gosh.
You're right.
They can do it one-handed.
Yeah. So for us, that was one of the reasons to start the pre-roll category. We saw like how small it was when we launched in 2017. And then we believed that it was going to be one of the biggest categories. And it is one of the fastest growing categories in the 100%. Industry. And like, she says flower and vape are still 1 and 2. Who knows what will happen in the next 5-10 years. But, that was one of the big things, right? Is understanding that like the new consumers are going to want to buy pre-rolls. So definitely that has, impacted the industry. And it's a big reason why we launched Jeter. And as far as potency, it's a tough one, man. Because me personally, I actually enjoy low potency joints.
Me too. High terps, low THC.
We actually make a couple low potency joints from Jeter, and it's almost just for like us founders to be able to smoke them because the dispensaries, to be honest, the consumer demand is still so tiered towards high potency products. Like sometimes I'm like, man, like let's put out more low potency stuff. But as we go and speak with our buyers, with the bud tenders, like the demand is still not that big compared to like the high potency stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm sure eventually, like people like to have those different options, right? And I do think it's important. Like for me, like I can't smoke, 45% THC stuff anymore. But 90% of consumers buying at dispensaries love that stuff. So it's kind of like a balance, right? But that's why it's good to be able to offer different potencies.
But I think you make an excellent point, because I'm with you. I'm a microdoser, low doser, even as a grower. I go and err more towards the high terp, low THC and cannabinoid. But I think you make a very valid point. How much do you think that feedback, and I think a few of you can pitch up, do you think it's a bias? Because again, I've found that a lot of those cannabis consultants are chronic users. They're regular users. They have a higher tolerance. So they don't step back and go, this is a 75-year-old woman that hangs out watching Fox and Friends all day, and she probably doesn't want to be off her rocker. She probably wants to do something a little low-key. Again, so do you ever go, hey, you know what? Give it a try. We like this.
Yeah. So the thing is, we do put out the option, and look, I mean, we have a good relationship, and obviously the brand has a strong place in the store. So like, they'll take whatever we give them, to be honest, right? But the sales data does show us that it's still very
predominant.
the high THC stuff is just way more dominant. Like and again, not everything is just about like the more potent it is gonna sell fast. No, there's gotta be quality in the product, in the flower, and the way you make it. There's a bunch more that goes to it as to why people like products. But at the end of the day, like if you have a 35% pre-roll and then you have a 15% pre-roll, like that one is just gonna move way quicker. It's just the
facts
the
of life
latest
right
today.
now, right? Yeah, very true. So we'll kind of start this next one off with Harrison. And then I would, again, be interested to hear Tim on this. When brands approach partners to expand into new markets, what are some of the key things that they look for or that they should expect from their partners? So this kind of, we're kind of playing off that, but what is that quid pro quo when coming into a new market and that you see with the people you work with? Harrison.
Yeah, so definitely the most important things that you're going to want to look for in a partner is their manufacturing capabilities, but more importantly, flexibility. You're going to want them to be able to produce multiple different types of SKUs. So in the pre-roll line, there's a bunch of different form factors in terms of different shapes and sizes of the pre-roll, different types of filter tips, if you want it infused or uninfused with hemp wrap. And so there's a lot of companies that only have one type of equipment or one automated machine, which is very limiting. So if you want flexibility in the cannabis industry, having as many SKUs as there's customer demand for is extremely important. Also, there's not a lot of margin to give. So if your partner is expecting a lot of margin, it's probably not going to be a long-lasting partnership. So you want someone who has realistic expectations. So definitely temper that. And then it's all about distribution if you're looking for a partner. So you're going to want to make sure that they have good relationships with retail stores, bud tenders, and distribution throughout the state. And then I just wanted to add a little bit of color to the last question. So there's definitely strong demographic preferences, but on a state-by-state level, things shake out to be pretty much exactly the same with flower number 1, vape pens number 2, pre-rolls number 3, and edibles number 4. There's a couple outlier states like Colorado where edibles is number 3, but it always typically follows that trend. But if you're a retail owner in a specific neighborhood, like let's say in Boca Raton, it's definitely going to be an older demographic, so you're going to want to have less vape pens, more edibles, maybe tinctures and sublinguals. But if you're a company, a manufacturer going into a state, you're going to want to cater to the entire state. And those health and wellness categories like tinctures, sublinguals, topicals, those make up typically less than 1% of all total sales and they have the most declines. Whereas pre-rolls and vape pens are the fastest growing categories in the entire industry. People are recreational consumers overall. If you're trying to make money in the industry and expand your business overall, you want to cater towards those recreational consumers. If you're a health and wellness company, it's going to be more of a lifestyle business and much smaller. And potentially when there's national legalization, that'll grow. But right now it is a very small subset.
Nice. Thank you. And you're right. And so you all know there's BDSA or Headset. There's several resources for some of this analytical data that gives you insight both from a demographical but also from a geographical location. So great.
Yeah, we put out a white paper every year in partnership with Headset. So I have a lot of data from last year. And we're putting out a new one. So definitely go to our website, customconesusa.com. We'll be putting that out in a few months. But Gen Z vapes are equal to flower, which is very interesting, as actually a point higher. So it's about like 33% of Gen Z people buy vapes, and then the other 33% is flower. And then that declines steadily as you get to baby boomers. But the interesting thing is pre-rolls are very consistent. Pre-roll market share is about 14 to 13% all the way across the board, from Gen Z to baby boomers. And then you'll see older people prefer edibles, where that's way less common in younger folks, and younger people prefer the vape pens.
Nice. And then Tim, if you want to pitch up a little bit as well.
What should a brand be looking for in a
Yeah.
expansion partner? I mean, I'll stay even a little bit more high level, and I'm passionate about this. We have a number of brand partners, and one thing that I've seen that can be really detrimental for either the brand or for the co-manufacturer that and distributor that they may be working with is a lack of clarity in the contractual agreement, right? Like, it's so, fences make good neighbors. There's, these relationships are kind of new and evolving how they work. My perspective is be as clear in the documents, in the sort of the initial documents as you possibly can be. Outline SKUs, talk about COGS analysis. Everyone should go in with realistic expectations about what they should be receiving from the relationship, because then you don't have to have those really uncomfortable, really sort of like, aggravated conversations about, well, why is this happening? Why is that happening? That kind of clarity can make a relationship super long lasting and really fantastic, because you get the hard conversations out of the way up front. Then you're just running towards sales numbers.
Nice. Well, if you hold on to the mics, we're down to our last question, and we're going to kind of get into like the tea leaves and tarot cards, which I always enjoy doing, kind of looking at what the future holds. I have my bias. I personally think that the edibles category is going to be the fastest growing in the future, just because of the greatest potential in audience, so tinctures, elixirs, things like that. But, with the movement on an international level, the Ukraine just passing medical the first of this year, Germany, for those that don't know, the leader in the EU, fifth largest GMP in the world, and obviously the highest population in the mainstream, EU continent. Things are moving forward on an international scale. There's 53 legal countries that have cannabis around this world, have 189, almost 200. So we're a little behind, but as we think about things moving forward with the high plausibility of federal legalization inevitably here, what do you see the product landscape looking like when federal legalization comes? And I'd really love, again, all of you come from such different perspectives within the industry. I can't wait to hear each of you in closing here.
I'm really excited to hear what Jackie has to say, because I'm going to be very biased here based on like my
Take notes.
our company and its positioning and our limited data set. But to Harrison's point in his previous comment, we believe that vaporization and flower are going to continue to be king. But absolutely, there's impacts both from a macro standpoint and within each market that impact that, right? I mean, Harrison made a great point. The pre-roll category doesn't exist in Pennsylvania or Ohio, right? Like it doesn't exist. And so we're reliant on regulators to allow us to give consumers what they want, or to show consumers new types of products or formulations that we've seen work in other markets. So I think it'll be impacted initially by regulation, ultimately by seeded by brands and driven by consumers. But my hope, vaporization and flower win the day. Personally, that's what I love, but also really exciting to see what's happening in states like Michigan or Minnesota with drinks, right?
Yeah. Ohio, there's so many that's
crazy. It's crazy, and it's cool, and it's like the low dose CPG product that's taking off in a way that edibles haven't, even though they've been around longer.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the future is definitely pre-rolls and vapes. Last year, pre-rolls was the fastest growing segment in the US at 12% year over year and 38% in Canada. In Canada, actually, pre-rolls are the second biggest category, second to flower, and you can see the trend line of flower steadily going down and pre-rolls steadily going up, so it wouldn't be surprising to see pre-rolls be the #1 category in Canada within the next 12 months. And then out of the fastest 3 growing subcategories in the US, pre-rolls was #1 and 3, and then all-in-one disposable vapes was #2. So it's a strong trend for convenience. The average American consumer is wanting something very fast and convenient. And then also it's that recreational customer. So beverages are cool, but they do typically make up less than 1% of total sales. And the edibles category also was declining in this year to date, as well as last year. So we are seeing customers really want that fun recreational product, and it's going to be pre-rolls and vape pens most likely.
Nice. And kind of one disclosure, Canada is a little bit of an exception because while they did legalize adult use October 17th of 2018, they launched a Cannabis 2.0 where only flower was released the first year. They didn't get into concentrates or the plausibility of other options or iterations until year 2. And then some provinces actually still didn't allow the segue over to things beyond flower. So to your point, like watching what they're doing, but they kind of launched it in a unique way. But Canadians are a little interesting in itself. So, Jackie.
I agree with you, Tim. I disagree with Lance, though. I agree that flower and vapes will continue to reign supreme, including the pre-roll category and that flower category. People are used to drinking alcohol, not chewing it like in a tablet. People are used to consuming by inhalation with cannabis, which I think will keep going. I think we're going to see a lot of new brands and new forms, but we're going to see a lot of the big brands becoming better household names. We're going to see more Rove across the country. We're going to see more Jeter everywhere. Going to be in every single state. It's going to have more consistency that I think the consumer will appreciate. And I think convenience is critical too, where, vapes or pre-rolls are a little more convenient than carrying the whole rig or bringing my, all my rolling papers and all of that. Yeah. People are going to want delivery at their doorstep, so making sure that you're partnering with retailers that have that convenience and that kind of last mile figured out. They're going to get more savvy and know what they want and want that consistency. So I think flower will remain supreme for sure.
Very well put. Thank you. And last but not least.
Well, there are already some great points made over here already. I mean, look, honestly, regulation is gonna, dictate for the next, 5-10 years. Like right now, Florida, you can smoke a pre-roll, but you can't do infused pre-rolls, right? Which is why at the moment it doesn't even make sense for us, Jeter, to come to Florida. So for, the foreseeable future, 5-10 years or so, you're gonna have regulation dictate, some of that, and, flower and vape potentially staying number one. But I do believe that if we were in an even playing field where regulation allowed all the products, like, for example, Canada's just now getting there. As, we mentioned earlier, like, pre-rolls is actually the number 2 category in Canada, and I think it's the fastest growing category in the country. And the trends that we're seeing in the states that are allowing, basically all these products to be available, you can see, again, the pre-roll category, like, just rising up, and then also disposable vapes. That's another big one right now that we haven't touched much upon, but us as Jeter, for example, like it's something that's we're gonna launch in the near future because we see the trend, but then also it's something that just makes sense. Like, why would you go buy a car, but then you still have to go find a battery? Like, eventually that whole
battery,
thing's evolving.
the wrong charger. We've been through that.
Don't get me wrong, cards are still the top selling one in that category, but disposables, if we have this conversation in a couple of years, I'm sure disposables will be the number one in the vape category. But for us as Jeter, like, we want to continue to bring the best pre-rolls in the world to everybody. We're launching 3 markets this year. We just launched Canada. In our first couple months, we saw like insane sales, and it's just been amazing to see another country adapt to our brand. So we're definitely looking forward to more countries legalizing in more states, and yeah, man. I mean, our goal is to make Jeter and pre-roll the number 1 category in the world, right?
Awesome.
And we're not gonna stop till we get there, but it's just gonna be exciting to see how the whole industry evolves.
Very true. Good way to wrap it up. I really want to thank all of our panelists for taking part today. Thank you again for everyone on behalf of them and myself. You guys have a good rest of the show. Thank you.